Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you 5 advanced build techniques that we can use to increase our damage per seconds in SAO Integral Factor. I say that these are advanced builds because we will need some specific skill records to be able to make these builds, unlike the one that I have shown in my previous video where you can use free skills or skill records that you can obtain easily from the gacha. Naturally, we will be able to increase our damage a lot more with these techniques that I'm going to show here, and it is more relevant when fighting against higher level bosses with elemental and weapon resistance. The first one is probably the one that most people already know, is using Connect skill to activate burst. The more recent burst skills have a really high damage multiplier and become the main source of DPS. However, we need to use skill with certain order to be able to activate the burst skill, which will use up our SP and slow us down on dealing damage to the enemy. With Connect skill, we can chain skill record that fulfill the burst sequence with the cost of just the Connect skill SP, which will enable us to chain our attack more easily. This technique works especially well on weapons with reduced burst cooldown like spear, dagger, and rapier, because we won't need to wait for the long burst cooldown before we can use the burst skill again. On rapier weapon, it is even better because there are some Connect skill that can reduce skills cooldown, which will enable us to spam the burst and Connect skill continuously. Also, given that the newer burst and full burst skill can be used without using the SP, basically with just the SP cost of the Connect skill itself, we will be able to do all of this. If we have a Connect skill which has the first element of the burst sequence, it will work best. So we just need to use the Connect skill and we will be able to activate the burst. If you don't have it, you can still use the Connect skill to chain the remaining skill sequence of the burst and save some of the SP cost that would otherwise be used when using normal skill. There is weakness with this technique, however, especially when you're fighting an enemy that jumps around a lot or even flying. Because the skill attached in the Connect skill will be used consecutively, if the enemy decides to fly away, we will have a hard time activating our burst, thus will reduce our DPS instead of increasing it. And as mentioned before, this technique does not work well on sword, mace, axe, and bow, because the burst skill on those weapons have a very long cooldown, and we will have a period where we cannot do good damage when we use it on those weapons. However, there is another technique that will allow us to use a burst skill continuously using any weapon, which is the Axel burst combo. As we know, Axel skill will allow our player to use skill without any SP and cooldown during the Axel period, as long as the skill is max limit broken. So, as long as you have a burst skill that is max limit broken and an Axel skill that will fulfill the burst sequence, which usually consists of the combinations of the weapon type and element of the skill, we will be able to use the burst skill and keep on reactivating the burst using the Axel skill and burst skill with no SP cost and no cooldown to do massive DPS during the Axel period. As mentioned, we can use this technique on any weapon as long as we have the Axel skill with the same element as the burst skills that we want to continue activating, or a max limit broken skill with the element of the burst that we want to activate. Better yet, Axel skill usually has elemental stacking buff, so when we are using the Axel skill to activate the burst, we will also get the stack buff, making our burst skill do more damage as we use them. Since we can extend Axel period when we use Axel ability skills, we can potentially have 60 seconds burst spamming period when all of our Axel ability are max limit broken, and you can imagine how much burst damage you can deal during that period. The downside of this technique though is that we cannot use rush to increase our damage further, because we cannot use both Axel and rush at the same time. Also, when the Axel period is on cooldown, we basically are back to doing slow DPS like usual. But what if we can fill that period when we can do slow DPS with something that allows us to do more DPS, which give birth to this third technique, which is interchanging the rush and Axel. The idea is very simple, which is just using the Axel build on set 1 and use the Awakening build on second set. Then we will use rush set when the Axel period is still in cooldown and use the Axel set when the rush period is on cooldown. That way we can minimize the time when we can only do normal DPS and increase our overall damage potential. Rush period normally lasts for 25 seconds, but there are some awakening skills that can increase rush period by 5 seconds. So technically we can get up to 65-second rush, but we probably won't get a good build if we only maximize the rush period. Same with Axel period, as mentioned before, where we will be able to extend it up to 60 seconds. So if we have a good Axel and awakening skills, we will be able to extend our DPS time longer. Unfortunately, even with these combinations, there will still be some period where we can only do normal DPS. However, we can use those time to better prepare our players when either the rush or the Axel period is ready to be used, such as filling up our switch gauge to level 2 before the Axel period is ready, or maybe increase stack buff to a higher stack so that we can do more damage when rush is ready. Speaking of getting higher stack buff, it is something that we definitely can use to increase our DPS. However, stack buff are not easy to maintain and usually takes a long time to get a good amount of stack to make them actually useful. So this fourth technique here will show you how we can get higher number of stack buff quickly, and that is still useful even when we don't maintain them. There are two different types of skill record that we need to be able to do this. The first one is the connect bow that has a connect bonus that can increase the buff stack on our player. This skill usually has a connect bonus that increases 3 stacks on the first skill, 6 stack on the second, and 9 stack on the third, which means we will get 18 extra stacks of the stack buff when we use the connect skill. Now if we have this buff that gives a 1% attack per stack, for example, when we use this skill itself, we will get 3 stacks. Then the connect will add 18 stacks of the buff, which will make it 21 stacks. And that means 21% attack, which is a lot considering Enhanced Attack 4 buff only gives 9% attack. Better yet, this skill will increase stack on all of the stack buff that we have on our player. So if we have multiple stack buff from any active or even ability skill, they all will be increased, giving us a massive buff. However, with connect skill, the more skill we add to the connect skill, the longer the cooldown is going to be, which will make it impossible for us to maintain the stack buff. But I think you would agree with me that 21 stack of buff is already plenty enough to make this technique useful, especially if we have multiple stack buff, and those buff usually are long enough to last during rush period when we mostly want the buff to be active. And then combined with the second skill type here, we will be able to bring the stack even higher at the time when we want it the most. The second skill type is the Awakening skill with rush effect that increases stack buff by 10. Technically, if we have 8 of these skills on our set, we will be able to get 80 stack when we activate the rush. Again, we won't be getting a good build if we just use those skills, but you get the idea. We can use those skills to increase our stack buff during rush when we want the stack to be as high as possible so that we can deal massive DPS during that time. Alright, so this brings us to the final technique in this video. So if you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please consider clicking the like button, subscribe and share to your friends so that they can learn it too. Now back to the technique. You probably are aware of the power of Shield of Loyalty buff, and that it can be passed to another skills to get the same amount of damage increase as when we attach the Azure Swordman Memory Yu-Gi-Oh to a mod sword skill. Well, if you don't know, you can check out my other video about it. But this technique won't work if we want to use it on burst skill, which are the strongest skill in the game so far, because there is always a delay before we use our burst skill. What if I tell you that we can make it work during full burst period? Yes, we can. But there are some requirements to make it work. First, we will need a full burst or burst skills that has a very fast first hit animation. Second, we need to put the Shield of Loyalty skill on switch. And third, we need to have a switch skill on our partner. The way it works is that we will first need to have our switch filled up and be on the full burst period, which means that we have activated our full burst skill once. Then we will use our switch skill and quickly use our full burst skill. You will notice that our partner will try to chain the switch, but it will get cancelled when we use our burst skill, so we will have time to use our next skill within the next 1 second window of the Shield of Loyalty buff. And when we do that, we will be able to deal a massive amount of damage. However, this technique is very speculative because sometimes we will not be able to cancel the switch, causing our player to step back, and sometimes the buff disappears too quickly. So it is not going to be very effective to be used consistently in real battle. So all of these techniques require us to have some specific skills before we can utilize them. So it is not suitable for beginners players. But I do have another video showing techniques that are more beginner friendly, because we can use skill records that are easy to obtain with those techniques that you can check on this next video here. Check it out and I will see you there. Bye now.